Here today. I'm really excited to see such an enthusiastic response for this subject matter. For those of you that I haven't met, my name is Talia Lerman and I'm the Chief Program Officer at JWF. I oversee the public programs, our grants process, which we're going to focus on today, and many of the other elements of JWF's mission-driven programmatic work, which we'll also talk a little bit about. Today's presentation is generously underwritten by Eileen Berman and Jay Bauer. And I'd like to just get some quick housekeeping out of the way before we launch into the content. So it's a lot of material to cover. We're going to be as time sensitive as we can. And I definitely want to make the presentation dynamic and interesting. So please, I think you're already muted. But if you want to turn your videos off or anything like that, you can. You can type your questions into the chat box, which I'm actually able to see. There is a Q&A feature as well, I think, on this. So I'll answer those questions and cover that material as we go. All right. I like that slide change because it's us breaking the glass ceiling. So the JWF mission is creating long-lasting social change to advance the status of all women and girls in the US. And our vision is to envision a world where gender is not a barrier to stay safe or to achieve success, and that women and girls have equal social, political, economic, and religious opportunities. I just want to quickly go over an agenda. We're going to talk about the mission and vision, who we are, what we do, our strategic plan focus area, which has changed recently. I'm going to talk a bit about social change and what that means. And then, of course, our grant making philosophy. I'm going to talk about the grants criteria and our schedule and the grants making process and what that looks like. And then also how you can get involved. And of course, a Q&A. I want to give a big round of applause and thank you to our 2021-2022 Grants Committee. Our co-chairs are Diane Kirschenbaum and Brenda Korach, and the other ladies on the screen are part of our committee. Grants Committee meetings this year are generously underwritten by Crescent Capital. We're going to cover a lot, like I said. I also want to mention that the Grants Committee members are JWF trustee members who invest their time and their philanthropic dollars. They have voting privileges that give them a significant voice in the grants process, which you'll hear about today. Trustee members can participate in all JWF activities and be on committees, such as the Grants Committee. Our GEM members, which is a new membership put in place, I think last year, are invited also to attend Grants Committee meetings as non-voting members. It's really important to us. We made this opportunity today, this presentation today, mandatory for our Grants Committee as an ongoing education process. It's one of the ways that we embody our mission by teaching and inspiring women to inspire other women. And we do this through providing programs like this one for our members and the community at large. So for all of you members and non-members, I appreciate you being here today. So I want to just quickly cover a glossary of terms. It's important when I read something new, I want to know what it is that some of these things will mean. So hopefully you'll keep some of these in mind as we go through them. So a 990, because we're going to cover important parts of the grants. A 990 is a form required by the IRS for almost every organization doing business. Direct service means a program or project that meets an immediate need. And we're going to talk a little bit about how that differs from social change. An LOI is a letter of interest, sometimes called a letter of intent. General support means that a grantee is seeking funding for the daily operations and the runnings of the business. And program support differs from general in that it's requesting funding for a specific program. Okay, social change, which we're going to have a whole slide about in a minute, is the long-term societal change over time. I really wanted to start with a little bit of a global perspective. There's some pretty sobering stats that some of us know, some of us don't. So I wanted to talk about those just a little bit. Only 1.9% of all philanthropy, and that's global philanthropy, goes directly towards women and girls. Evidence shows that investing in women benefits all of humanity, but capital just simply isn't flowing there. Since February 2020, as you can imagine, with the recession that has followed coronavirus, 23 million women have removed themselves from the labor force, and another 5 million have lost their jobs. As of February 2020, Black and Hispanic women have had the highest unemployment rates among women, and that's 8.9 and 8.5 respectively. So this is kind of covering a little bit of what funding landscape we're in. So, okay, so I just wanted to give a little, oops, sorry, technical glitch here. There we go. So we don't do this work alone. We are part of the FWFA, which is the Florida Women's Funding Alliance. We also participate with the Florida Philanthropic Network. Through our work with the FWFA, we were part of funding critical research on the status of women and girls in Florida by the county. We also are a part of the Jewish Women's Funding Network as well. I also want to put in a plug for our January 25th policy discussion, which is a kind of co-branded event featuring Holly Bullard of the Florida Policy Institute. So I'll share a link of that a little bit later. Okay, so how do we take that global perspective and make it local, right? We utilize strategic gender lens grant making to provide both project and general support to nonprofits whose mission reflects our own. All grant proposals that we consider are considered through a prism of a gender lens. And our JWF trustees are committed to take risks to fund issues that other organizations don't address, so specifically in the social change arena. So I mentioned our strategic plan that we recently underwent, and as a result of that and the input, we've identified financial security and economic empowerment for women and girls as its priority issue for the next 3 to 5 years. All of our activities are going to focus exclusively on education, advocacy, grant making that supports and promotes social change in those areas. So what is social change, right? Social change, it can impact a lot of things. It's that 30,000 foot perspective I may have mentioned. It's long-term impact, it's systemic, and it has a broad context. It can affect value systems, social organizations, rules of behavior, social structures. You've heard about our Money Mavens program, our advocacy sessions this month, and a few other programs that we planned for the season. These are all in line with the promotion of financial literacy, economic empowerment, and our grant making is in tandem with us walking that walk to fund social change work. So what's social change and what's the difference between that and direct service? So we differentiate JWF differentiates ourselves because we do take that 30,000 foot approach to systemic social change. And direct service is a program or project focused on meeting immediate needs. The general principle, right, of alleviating poverty, for instance, by facilitating self-sufficiency has a long history. You can think of the feed a man a fish parable, which, by the way, goes back to the Sephardic Jewish philosopher Maimonides. Give someone a fish, you feed them for a day, teach someone to fish, and you feed them for a lifetime. So that's the differences between direct service and social change. So what would be an example of a societal problem with a social change lens? A 2020 Ajon survey found only 23% of US women could correctly answer 3 financial questions, literacy questions, on interest rates, inflation, and risk diversification. So that's compared to 36% of men, but really both of those numbers are fairly low. What would be a solution to address that problem? Examples could be to fund nonprofits that are teaching those financial skills to women and girls, fund organizations that retrain women to re-enter the workplace, fund programs that address the gender gap in STEM fields. Our Money Mavens workshop is another example of how to address that. And again, harking back to social change, we aim to move the needle of women's overall financial literacy and economic empowerment. So what has our impact been? JWF has awarded over $3 million in grants since we began. And JWF awards $200,000 in grants per season. So that's our annual impact. So who can apply to our grants? Geographic areas, US and Israel. No more than half of all grants awarded are funding projects in Israel. We want to have a balance there. US organizations that are outside of Florida have to have a program or presence here in Florida, preferably Palm Beach County. And that's also so that we can also, monitor and see that progress. Grant seekers have to have a 501c3 tax designation, which JWF also has, or they have to have a fiscal agent with that tax designation. That's often the case with in Israel to have that, have a partner in that. We are not limited to Jewish organizations, to funding Jewish organizations, and grantees can request either project or general support, which we kind of referenced a little bit earlier. Only feminist social change organizations are available for general support. I also wanted to mention that even if the organization itself is not social change or feminist, in their nature, the specific program that they're requesting funding might be. So that is something that we go over with the committee to really think about. So these are additional grant making stipulations. All the awards are 2-year grants. So for instance, a grant of 10,000 is 10,000 per year for 2 years. So that's our funding cycle, is that 2 years. We only allocate multi-year grants. So the second year of funding is contingent upon grantees meeting predetermined benchmarks. And there's usually 2 of those. Organizations are eligible to receive the 2-year cycle of funding. So a total theoretically of 4 years, but thereafter they'd be unable to apply for the next grant cycle. So it's like a pause. And that of course, we want to hear from as many organizations that have need as possible. And of course, we only accept 1 LOI, that letter of interest, per organization per grant cycle. So again, additional considerations. We don't fund direct service. We don't fund scholarships. We don't fund allocations to individuals or event sponsorships. So you may be wondering, what's our cycle look like? So this is the example from this upcoming season's grant cycle. So in August, we put in a request for LOIs. I started this role in June, so this was actually a perfect time for me to begin so that I could do some of that research on some of those grantees. So those LOIs were due in August. The request for LOIs was due in August, and then the LOIs due to us was September. We did a notification of the grantees that we were interested in inviting to actually put in a full application. And those full applications were due in November. And you'll notice that there's a pretty big gap between November and March when we award them. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that timing in a moment. So now we'll turn to a little bit of the nitty gritty about what's in a grant application. What is it that a grantee, what do we need to hear from a grantee in order to get a pretty clear picture on who they are and what they do? These are some important things for us. We want to know the number of board members. We want to know how many of those board members are women. Remember, gender lens. Number of staff, senior staff, how many of those are women, the types of support that they're requesting, the grant amount that they have, their total program budget, their annual operating budget, and of course their geographical your geographical focus. So what else do we need to know besides some of the information I just shared with you? And there's a whole lot more in this application, but we want to know, we need from them a personal narrative. So this involves all of your basic stuff, right? The organizational overview, an impact statement, description of activities. So for instance, what is the program that they intend, to put together? How does it tie into social change? How does it meet a social change, need? Who's the leadership involved in helping that program happen? Who's the leadership that's doing those programs? Do they have collaboration partners? Are they, and that's not just funding other funders, that is, perhaps it's two organizations that are working together on something. And then of course the goals, the timelines and objectives of the project or the, the program. And then of course there's the program budget form and also a 2 to 3 minute video. So I know people may have some questions about this particular slide. I want to talk a little bit about the myth of overhead, because this is something that we hear sometimes, and I just wanted to address it. So JWF only funds social change organizations, as we've discussed. Social change is staff intensive and staff driven, and sometimes the staff essentially is the work. Think about education, advocacy, working with legislators and so on. What we want to look at really is looking at the efficacy of the organization. Is the organization carrying out its mission successfully? What does that look like? Are there meaningful and verifiable outcomes? This is definitely where the parable of quality over quantity fits in. Also, it's common and understandable for staff salaries and materials to be the bulk of those programmatic costs. So what else do we pay close attention to? The 990 form, which I mentioned before, which is, important. That shows us everything from how much they spend, where they're spending it, what salaries look for, that kind of thing. Board of directors composition, as we discussed earlier, what's that ratio look like? What's their annual budget look like? And the video notes. So what I mean by that is with the submission of the video, we do take those things into consideration. So some of the other things, without giving away our secret sauce, as it were, we also look for those ideas, those indicators, the social change indicators. So some of these would be a shift in definition, right? Shift in behavior, a shift in engagement. How does it have an impact on the community at large? Is there a shift in policy? Can, if one of the organizations wants to do more engagement with women in legislative processes and things of that nature, how can we track that? And is that one of the initiatives of that organization? Maintaining past gains. This is something sometimes we take for granted, right? Building sustainable institutions. So what does our grants review process look like? Our grants committee meets 3 times to review all of the applications using a scorecard, some of the parameters we talked about earlier, interviewing potential grantees, discussing our thoughts. It is, a quorum, right? And we talk about the merits of each and kind of voting on the merits of each. And then we do this in January and February. And then how do we make a final determination on moving forward with the grantees who we are most interested in? So the grants committee convenes a 4th time, and that's usually mid-February, to do a final tally and discuss all of our closing thoughts. And it's important for us all to have a voice and have an opinion, and this is a really key role for our grants committee and our trustees. Examples of grants we'll review this year. I really did want to just mention a few of them, and this is by no means an exhaustive or complete list. These are just some of the ones that we're looking at. One of the grants wants to provide training and support to 40 art teachers in this county. This is a program that they're already doing elsewhere. They want to do that for elementary and middle school teachers to teach computer coding to their students. One is an economic empowerment program to assist domestic abuse survivors overcoming financial abuse. Again, that really ties directly into the financial security and economic empowerment. Equipping and introducing high school girls, particularly those of color, to organizations that are led and helmed by women executives. Certainly JWF is one of those. Some more examples. Oops. Some more examples are creating a wave of change in the Jewish community to advance women into leadership and transformative positions, and transforming communal culture into one of equity, justice, and respect. A Florida advocacy program to grow and deepen coalition work statewide. So this would be leveraging partnerships and amplifying the voice of women and girls in that legislative process through direct and indirect actions. And another one is to find long-term successful employment for at-risk young women in Israel. So somebody's asking a couple questions here. One is there a specific format that the 2 to 3 minute video needs to follow? The answer to that is it's fairly open-ended. The timing matters because, of course, during the grants committee meetings, we often are interviewing, multiple in one day. So that time frame really matters. And we want to hear about, kind of to bring to life the application that an organization submitted. So we want to hear about, what they're doing, how they're living their mission. So somebody else is asking about the 990 form, which we talked about previously. I'll show that slide again. Also, it's generally restating the video is generally restating the organization's mission, the program, if they're asking for a specific program funding, and what the impact is. So that's some of what's included in that video. Okay, so Gail Greenberg, thank you, is asking, is there a history of asking overlapping small organizations to combine? That's sort of a twofold, there's sort of a twofold answer to that. If there's two analogous kind of grant things, if we do not choose that either one of those, we may kind of like act as a reference to those two groups, perhaps if they're analogous, if that would perhaps strengthen them to work together. We have ended up working with some of the grantees. We've worked with some of the grantees that we funded in the past. A great example would be the Women's Foundation of Florida. But we've never asked groups to combine for a grant. That's really up to them. And one of the things that I didn't mention here, but that Diane Kirschenbaum, one of our chairs of the grants committee, mentioned, is that this is a growth opportunity. Going through the motions of this that we do every year is a growth opportunity for every person in every organization that's involved. It's an opportunity for the grantees, our potential grantees, to go through the motions. Some of them, perhaps this is the first time they've ever submitted a grant at this level. It's an opportunity for our grants committee to do a deep dive on what it takes to review these. It strengthens those skills. It's a wonderful opportunity for our staff to liaise with our trustees. So there's a really well-rounded situation that happens with this process. And I find that one of the most rewarding aspects of what we do. Marlene Silver has a question about the benchmarks that we follow. So there's actually 2 times that we request hearing from the grantees once they've been funded. So one is sort of like kind of midterm, it's like a progress report. And the other one is if it's a program, it's at the end of the end of our granting cycle to kind of hear what benchmarks and things that they've had. Have they had challenges? You know, what's kind of happened? So we do like to take that holistic approach to hear from them as well. Jennifer has mentioned that organizations set their own benchmarks in their proposal, and we hold them to those. So that's also part of the accountability process as well, and part of the growth process for this. Great point. Jennifer just mentioned that organizations can request feedback if they're rejected. And that's one of the things that I wanted to do this year, was just give them, maybe a couple heads up here and there if there was like another growth opportunity. Liz is asking, is there a systematic way in which we ask organizations questions, or is it more ad hoc? It's pretty consistent. It's pretty consistent. And that's so that we create a space for fairness. We have a scorecard that we do internally with our grants committee, so that we can give the grantees an opportunity to be heard evenly across the board. So part of those 3 meetings that I mentioned earlier, part of the 3 meetings with the grants committee, we invite, it's a set interview with the grantees. So the idea is that the grants committee puts together their thoughts, and then we get together, discuss those thoughts. We hear the interview of them, and then we continue on. That is equal and fair. So that's part of that. Are there additional questions? Next slide. Oh, that was our time for questions. Okay, anybody else has any questions? Go ahead and fill those in here. I hope that this gave you a little bit of an understanding, a little peek under the hood, as it were, of our grants process and how it fits into what we're doing globally with social change in our organization. If you want to support and participate the valuable work that we do, there's a variety of ways to do that. One would be to become a trustee member or a GEN member. You can donate to our annual campaign. And of course, my contact information is up there as well. What I'll do when I send a thank you for everyone who's attended, I'll put in a few of the links that I mentioned. One of them is that full report about the status of women and girls economically in the state, and anything else that comes up as well. So let me just see, there's one other question. So Shani's asking, for the timeline of the grants, does it follow the org's fiscal calendar, or does your 2-year timeline start at a set time? So we, once the awards are given, we basically, we kind of get that process started. So the accepted grants, let me see if I can go back to that slide. It might not let me. The accepted grants, we basically let everyone know, all the grantees know, in March. So that would basically be when we would start the after process, right? Sending them the check, sending them the letter, the contract, giving them the parameters that we would need from them, during the length of that. So that process starts usually after March. Okay, so that's pretty much it for today. I want to thank everyone for being here. If you have any questions, my contact information is there, and it will also be in the, let me just stop this here. Am I screen sharing? There we go. Yeah, so it's going to be, I'll get back to everybody who attended, and I'll give you some of that information as well. Okay, I hope everybody has a really great day, and I really appreciate your time. Thanks.